fiddle theory. Well, in this case, I think we're running chaos theory. Give me a second. I'm still trying to pick something to listen to. I think we will. We'll go with Faux Tales. And then we'll turn it down a bit in my ears. Okay. So the title for today's stream is a pretty simple one. AMD is not in control. If you haven't missed it, or if you have missed it, or you haven't been paying attention, AMD just launched a completely new graphics card. First, mainstream RDNA 2 design, the Radeon 6500 XT for I think 199 US dollars. A sub $200 graphics card. Sounds good, right? Have I already gotten location badges on her? Sorry, ally. Uh, okay, actually, I've gotten a bunch of exploration badges on Aphid. Um, I need to go get Talos. I guess I'm going to have to bring up a badge tracker. And actually check my zone badges. Alright. Badge checklist. Okay, collapse all. Location, no, exploration. Alright, I need Talos. Last line of default. Wow, how did I miss that one? How am I doing on history badges with her? Okay, I still need a badge in Croatoa and a badge in Atlas Park. Okay, this should be the Atlas Park badge. Alright, anyway, so AMD launches this brand new graphics card. And first of all, there's no supply. In fact, the supply is so constrained that even scalpers who had contractual deals with digital currency miners to provide them with used graphics cards to then resell are finding that there are no cards for them to grab. There's no cards at all to be had. Uh, on top of that, Asus, big manufacturer, lots of people have heard of Asus. Asus went and doubled the MSRP, the manufacturer's suggested retail price point of the Radeon 6500 XT before it even launched. AMD announced the price, and less than 24 hours later, Asus said their price was going to be double. And on top of that, Asus is celebrated record profits due to selling graphics cards to digital currency miners. Yeah, Asus isn't looking so good right now. It's were the U.S. to have a competent Department of Justice, a competent Securities and Exchange Commission, Asus would probably be under investigation for collusion and intent to defraud. Because the numbers aren't lying there on how Asus's money was achieved. Uh, so Asus, basically, they just turned around less than, and what's worrying here is Asus is one of the partners mentioned for Intel's upcoming Arc graphics processors, and Asus basically just turned around and gave AMD the double-barreled middle finger. I just, bam, both fingers up, screw you. And there are other events going on. AMD trying to cut a deal with Samsung. Samsung aggressively trying to uh, take market share away from TSMC. TSMC rushing to build more fabs to run out ahead and get fabrication facility built before serious questions start to be being asked of what exactly uh, uh, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, was doing with the pre-production chips. Uh, there are lots of independent investigators looking for answers as to exactly why graphic cards from both AMD and Nvidia, new next generation graphic cards, new chips that hadn't even been officially released, are showing up in the rigs of digital currency miners with TSMC fabbed chips. Where did those cards come from? Who made them? Well, I can go ahead and tell you who made them. ASUS made them. ASUS sold them. TSMC fabricated the chips and gave those chips to ASUS early. As I said, this is were the U.S. to have a competent judicial system, uh, there would be some serious questions being asked here, and subpoenas would be flying forth, orders of discovery, and I guarantee you ASUS would be waving electromagnets near every single hard drive they can lay their hands on, and bundles of solid state drives would be finding their way into chipper shredders. At this point, the incidental and casual evidence is too strong to suggest that ASUS unknowingly colluded with partners to profit from digital currency mining and defraud both the upstream suppliers, in this case AMD and Nvidia, and potentially Intel, and to defraud downstream vendors. Basically, I think that was the alumnus badge. Was that the alumnus badge? Yeah, it was alumnus. Okay, we got alumnus, Magnus Rising, head juice, lore keeper, midnight archivist, researcher. I'm not sure which one I'm missing on researcher. We got the Talos badge, Bez Hive, Warburg, Recluse's Victory, Pocket T, Midnighter, Mayhem, Founders Falls. Okay, I'm heading to Founders Falls next. And then from Founders Falls to Boomtown. Chaos Titian, Foggy, and Misunderstood. Founders Falls. Um, okay, actually, we will go. Just do a standard circuit. Anyway, so uh, and this is one of those where I probably should just break out the Impress and just start making a spreadsheet of all the relationships between who's defrauding who committed this crime, who sold things they weren't supposed to have sold. But what it comes back to is right now AMD does not have control over their partners. AMD does not have control over the vendors. Asus just demonstrated quite clearly that AMD has absolutely zero leverage for Asus to sell products to the intended market. There's no leverage there to. How did I skip this? There's no leverage on the part of AMD to actually get their products. And the reason why this matters is software ecosystem. Companies like AMD provide not just on the profits from selling hardware, they get a percentage of the sale of the chip that actually goes into a product. That is one way AMD makes money is they sell the chips. In the case of processors, AMD sells the processors directly. In the case of graphics cards, AMD sells the chips to graphic card vendors who then put those chips on boards and manufacture those boards and then sell the final product. Uh, that's one way that AMD makes money. AMD also makes money through software services. AMD makes money by providing engineers who can help developers optimize their code, pay for the optimization of code, and in the server market, this can be a literal billion-dollar business as banking companies, data companies, construction companies. What do I need in Boomtown? I need one badge, and it's destined for Valhalla. I am not sure where that badge is. I guess now time is I need to give Combat Teleport a workout. Whoa, that was some super lag. What does my neck graph look like? My neck graph looks okay. Mm, I know there's a badge somewhere up here. Let's make sure I run over it. There it is, standing on top of it. Not that badge. Oh, I see it. How did I miss that one? Don't ask. Don't answer that. Anyway, uh, so AMD just they can't get their board partners to do it. They need the software ecosystem. And as I was saying, the data center cells where data centers pay AMD for expertise in optimizing compilers, for optimizing data loads, for understanding the hardware, possibly for even installing the hardware and maintaining the hardware and running tests on the hardware. That's a big software business. And also, likewise, with game developers. AMD has software services where if a game developer needs help with writing graphics code, rewriting graphics code, optimizing for a software loadout software service, AMD offers developer services, and these services are not gratis. You pretty much have to pay for them. You can pay for an AMD engineer to come in and actually write or rewrite or help write your code. I just got the badges in here. Why am I going for these? Uh, what else do I need? Okay. Uh, I am a vigilante, so I can head to Atlas and get Recluse's Victory. We'll do that next. And then we'll check for Bloody Hands. As the badge shaker takes a while to process. Okay, yeah. Here's the badge I want. Check my characters. Ethan does not have it yet. Okay. Scrape. Okay. Anyway, so AMD's that's the other main way that AMD actually makes money is selling software services. Now, in order for AMD software services to be valuable, they have to have customers who are actually using their hardware. Having a team of developers to help with epic processors optimizing and piling huge data loads isn't really useful if AMD doesn't have anybody who actually has EPYC processors in their data centers and their calculatory centers. Having developers on standby to be purchased to help with graphics code doesn't really help AMD if nobody has the platform to which those developers are trained to deal with. AMD can have all the engineers they want experienced in RDNA 2 software development. If nobody has an RDNA 2 target for that code to work on, those developers are basically sitting there costing AMD money. The software ecosystem actually having product in the market that is being used is how AMD sells the rest of its services. Without that hardware out there, and okay, yes, AMD has RDNA 2 hardware out there in Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, PlayStation, and PlayStation 5. There is a install base of RDNA 2 hardware. Another RDNA 2 hardware install base is coming up, the Steam Deck. And these may be complete total market inversions if Valve can meet the intended demand, which is a big question in and of itself. Can Valve actually lay its hands on enough Steam Deck components to meet the demand for the Steam Deck? Because consumers cannot get their hands on graphics hardware because of the malfeasance of various vendors who are not playing fairly. Well, not just not playing fairly, openly taking bribes and openly taking contracts to sell to the non intended clientele. And that's an important distinction, the non intended clientele. AMD's entire software portfolio is built on intended clientele getting the intended product. AMD needs consumers to actually have the product in hand in order to sell these software services. That is a critical part of AMD's entire business model. If the intended clients are not getting the products that AMD is selling, AMD does not have anyone to sell their other services to. This means that AMD's business model is fundamentally being broken. That's a big problem. And this is why Asus throwing the double barreled middle finger, shouting, screw you, and just setting their own price for a graphic card. And then, far we can tell, not actually selling those graphic cards in any location that I can track. And that's disconcerting in and of itself. That's a couple of huge red warning flags there. AMD is not in control. AMD does not have control over their board partners. And there's no telling at this point, short of uh, leveraging the information out of AMD internally, just how many chips was Asus contractually obliged to get? What if Asus is theoretically the largest original design manufacturer that AMD was dealing with? What if Asus was had 85 or 90% of all shipped processing units out of the fabrication facility? You may think that's a high number, but I'm not throwing that number out there for no reason. So, keeping that in mind, that Asus may have, by virtue of their size as a manufacturing company, may have had the bulk majority of all the fab processors, and Asus is setting their own prices that are far in excess of the price that AMD set, and Asus is not selling to the clientele that AMD business model says or depends on Asus selling to. That's a big problem for AMD because AMD may not have physical control over those chips after they leave, over the graphic card chips or even the processor chips after they leave the production facility. Typically speaking, since the chips are fabbed in TSMCs or another fabrication facility, maybe Global Foundries, unless they're fabbed in Global Foundries USA facilities, AMD probably does not have physical access control to determine or to AMD does not have the physical access to stay with the chips to make sure that they get to where they're supposed to going. And even if they got to where they're supposed to going, once those chips have entered the ODM and are put on the board, AMD no longer has any control over what happens to the chips after that, which is a big problem right now. And that's part of the reason why we have the graphic card shortage is the ODM vendors, the midstream vendors, are not selling to the intended clientele. They are simply not putting the cards into the retail marketplace as AMD expects as AMD expects to be carried out. So again, this is a big problem. AMD does not have control, and I'm not sure there is a simple way for AMD to regain control. AMD's only real option is to deal with vendors, with ODMs, and to rewrite contracts to sell chips to ODMs who will honor the intended clientele. What is my difficulty level? Oh, this is no. Good thing I checked that before I actually went further in the mission. I may have a good build, but I am not going to be able to do +4 at hex 8 against, well, you'll see the enemies in a second. Let's restart this. I will have to do x8 later, but even if I could take them down, see, I'm limited to level 40, so I've lost some of my upper level powers, like I've lost, in this case, I've lost Unleashed Potential, and I've lost my Placate. Alright, we'll let them do their little talky talk. Alright, so, alright. And on top of all of that, on top of AMD basically getting thrown under a bus by their largest board partner, probably the partner who had the most amount of GPUs allocated to them, then the select unit of Press Edition 6500 XTs that made it into press hands, because AMD does have contractually obligated, they do get some shipments of cards, and they do make these cards available to testers. No, I was not one of them. Gee, I wonder why. Uh, those testers quickly realized that the 6500 XT is worse than the $200 card from 2016, which isn't really a big surprise. I ranted about this when the 6600 XT was launched, that when AMD launched a over $200 card saying it for the 1080p market, my jaw hit the floor. And my jaw hit the floor because there's, as you think of a way to say this, 1080p is the dominion of the smartphone. Rendering high frame per second, 120 frames per second at 1920 by 1080, or in the equivalent 1080 21 by 9 ultra wide resolution, is the dominion of the smartphone, of the MediaTek processor, of the Mali graphic processor, of the Zyno Samsung processor. That is the dominion. That is where, that is the 1080p space. The smartphones, the mobile products that don't cost that much. If you're aiming a desktop card at 1080p, you got to be under $150. You got to be under the cost of a cell phone, of a base cell phone that does 1080p perfectly fine. A 200 an over $200 card for 1080p is just jaw hit the floor. No, 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 no. That's no, 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 no. So AMD had already screwed up there, and that one of their fundamental product lines was just from the start, before anything else, was completely misaimed for no good apparent reason. I never found an explanation for why the 6600 XT was targeted at 1080p or why it cost so much. And shortages aside, it was a badly aimed product from the start, a badly spec'd product from the start, an overpriced product from the start. Way too expensive, even if you accounted for component shortages. Overpriced, underperformance. Why would we have expected the 6500 XT to be any different? Overpriced, underperforming. Not really a big surprise after the 6600 XT. It's not. Um, so, kind of keeping that in mind, AMD has put themselves into a hole. Uh, they overpriced the MSRP of the 6500 XT, then their board partners overpriced it even further and have no intent of actually selling it at the listed MSRP. They work through their little cut screen. Nice use of the stagger remote. And let's work our way through here. Okay, moving on. And this brings us back, or this kind of brings us around to Intel, because the door is wide open for Intel. And it really, I think, comes down to how Intel has configured their contracts. Excuse me. Uh, alright. How Intel has configured their contracts. And that's kind of a big deal. First of all, we don't know how Intel has contracted with TSMC. We know that Intel is on the back foot with TSMC, basically having to accede to anything TSMC demands in order to get production done. So Intel has taken kind of a beating from TSMC's president, maybe a deserved beating. Uh, but kind of keeping that in mind, that Intel is on the back foot when it comes to making a product. Intel is also on a back foot when it comes to the board partners. We don't know exactly what concessions Intel had to make to ODM board partners to get them to dedicate assembly line time to making Intel's ARC graphics cards. We don't know that Intel is negotiated from a position of strength, that is to say that Intel was the one who dictated the terms, or if the ODMs and TSM. Well, we know Intel wasn't dictating terms with TSMC, but we don't know if Intel was dictating terms with the ODMs. If Intel was able to dictate terms with the ODMs and assure, and Intel has the same thing as AMD, they depend on the software, the intended clientele. Intel processors are widely used in lots of laptops, so lots of vendors have to pay Intel for software help, for driver help, for engineer help. Intel Xeon is widely used in data centers, so Intel is able to serve development services directly to major customers at a commercial rate. That is one of the ways that Intel makes money is through the selling of hardware products and through the selling of actual services. So Intel, like AMD, is dependent on the intended clientele. Uh, Unlike AMD, Intel has been known to play unfairly. Intel normally is kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room, so there's a strong chance that Intel was able to, while Intel may have been on the back foot with TSMC, and TSMC definitely knows that they had the processing product, the entire portfolio package on top of Intel. Intel needs TSMC. TSMC does not need Intel. Keeping that in mind, we don't. Intel may have been at TSMC's mercy, but the board vendors, Intel may not have necessarily needed the board vendors that Intel contracted with. So depending on how Intel actually wrote the contracts for the actual production of the graphics cards themselves, Intel may be able to guarantee contractually, uh, and the contract may have punitive measures that if these cards do not get to the retail market, are not sent to the intended clientele, then there are fiscal punitive measures that will be enacted as a result. And this is where I want to ramp my team size up. So this may be a little chaotic. You know, when you're hearing creaks and groans from the chair and you kind of go, yeah, this was a cheap chair. I really hope it holds together until I can afford a better chair. Anyways, while I'm waiting for this cutscene to play out. So there's lots of unanswered questions here. Now, the good news for Intel is that first actual production units of Intel Arc have landed in the hands of some testers, and the results are encouraging. The top level Arc GPU does indeed to be hanging tough with the mid-range cards from AMD and Nvidia. Now, when I say mid-range, I mean actual mid-range. I mean the 6700, the 3070, the actual mid-ranges, not the low end. And let's be blunt here for a second. The 6600 XT is a low end product. It is not a mid-range. It's not a high range. It's a low end. It's the base. It's the bottom of the chain. Going under that, and now you're below the bottom. Time to. Whoa, stunned. Maybe I should have turned on the anti-mez for this. Yeah, I knew the Caltrops was going to send them scattering, but that was still kind of funny anyways. It at least cleared the room and gave me a moment to make sure I had anti-mez up. Alright. Anyway, so the initial benchmarks on the Intel graphic processors are very encouraging. It's looking really good for Intel. The question is, and I mean the big question is, they spawn right on the Caltrops. That could either end badly or not so badly. But it is kind of funny to watch Run Little Girl run in action. But that's also why Caltrops are almost never taken. Whiplash on discussion and tone. I am at least plowing through them pretty easily. So there is that. Admittedly, none of them I think. Nope, they are. So I am getting some bosses in here. So okay. Anyway, so Intel, things are looking kind of good. The real question will be, can Intel deliver in supply and quantity at MSRP to consumers? We still don't know how the Intel Arc cards are going to be sold. We don't know if Intel is going to do a partnership with Valve and sell them through Steam. direct to Steam. We don't know if Intel is going to partner with other publishers who have online catalogs of digital games that you can buy, and maybe a partnership with Good Old Games uh, and sell through GOG Galaxy. We don't know if there will be a connection with EA Play, a connection with Microsoft. There's various ways that Intel could go to ensure that actual gamers get a hold of the ARC GPUs. And depending on how the contracts are written, Intel may be able to, uh, if the cars are not delivered to where they're supposed to be going, then there are punitive measures that Intel can enact at a legal level or a financial level, kind of a guarantee of performance. Either you deliver these cards to this location at this price point, or you pay this amount of money to us because those cards weren't delivered on time. And that was something that AMD obviously didn't have, was a breach of faithfulness and contract clause or a performative clause in their contracts with the original design manufacturers, which again AMD's not in control. And I Lisa Stu's really smart. I'm not really sure why AMD didn't have performative clause contracts for the graphics cards, especially after the 6800 turned into a complete paper launch ghost town, no product at all that was making it to retail market. So I I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if it's an intentional failure on AMD's legal department internally or what. I have some suspicions, but uh, go into them. Since they are only suspicions with no founding evidence, there's little point in speculating beyond what I am aware of. I mean, I'm not exactly clickbaiting here. Okay, so working back around. Intel's in a good spot depending on how their contracts are written. If Intel is able to get supply into the hands of gamers, into the hands of those who haven't been able to purchase a graphic processor because of the crimes going on in regards to the supply and distribution of pre-existing graphic cards, then Intel's in a good shot for a market inversion. Intel could take a substantial amount of market share away from AMD and Nvidia simultaneously. It may be very possible, again, depending on how good Intel's lawyers were at writing contracts, that Intel could completely upend the consumer graphics card market, the desktop graphics card market in general, and potentially within a week or so of product launch, if supply is where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be there, Intel could be the number one graphics card vendor in terms of market share for a product line, and that really depends on everything being delivered on time according to contract. We don't know if that's going to happen. Since we really don't know yet how Intel is going to make sure that the cards actually get into consumers' hands. Yeah. Where? Oh, there's the powerful image of my lies. Well, powerful image of my lies. Meet powerful image of kicking your butt. Okay. I need you to stop firing over there. That's it. Get lost. Yeah. That is one thing Caltrops is really, really good for. Is to break up enemies that are flinging projectiles at you from a distance. Something doing damage to me. Okay. Also, in the line of good news for people who are not AMD and not Nvidia, is Fantasy One Silicon. Now, to be fair, Fantasy One has long been a digital currency product provider. If you go to Fantasy One's or InnoSilicon, sorry, the parent of Fantasy One, the uh, InnoSilicon product page, they are pretty much all about digital currency mining hardware and digital currency gear. It's pretty much where they've made their mark at. But InnoSilicon, having a very practical idea of what's going on with the digital currency markets, that's also why they have the Fantasy One GPUs. Now, if you don't know, the Fantasy One GPUs are based on PowerVR. Now, PowerVR is, generally speaking, a mobile oriented developer. Their strongest product point for the selling mobile graphics chips to Android vendors and to Apple, and selling integrated graphics processors to Intel. And PowerVR was basically kicked out of both Apple and Intel. They're looking for a new product market, so now they're kind of in the desktop space with the Fantasy One GPUs, and those GPUs are presently not intended for the American market. As far as I can tell, InnoSilicon, I'm probably not going to say it right, but probably why I settled on Fantasy One. The Fantasy One GPUs are not intended for the American market at the present time. They're pretty much only intended for the Chinese market. Well, why is that? Well, as we've just seen, and we're seeing this in Russia as well now, when Russia is moving to ban digital currencies, the amount of power, electrical power, that's being pumped into the illegally obtained, the fraudulently sold AMD and Nvidia graphics cards out in the market is more than the power grids of Russia or China to support. Massive swaths of China are undergoing rolling blackouts because the CCP does not have the energy production capacity to power all of the graphic cards that were illegally sold. Give me a second. Positron. And let's break out. I'm pretty sure I don't get to fight these guys. This may have been the final part of this, and I know I'm just running this SSA through. Even though I already got the badge. Normally you get the badge and then dunk out. There may be one more fight. So I'll have to really quickly toggle back up. Effing glitter. Alright. Toggle back up. Anti-mez on. Alright, we're going into final cutscenes. Well, overrated. Yeah. This was not one of the best thought out storylines. Effectively, Paragon Studios wanted to pull a Death of Superman, so they were going to kill off Statesman, and they, when all the players figured out, I mean, I don't think there was anyone who didn't know that this story arc was going to end with Statesman going Kaputsky. They decided to kill off Sister Psyche as well, which pissed the player base off even more. If you thought the player base was revolted by the Cirque du Soleil, Siegfried and Roy style Circle of Thorns makeover, the player base was incensed that Paragon Studios killed off both States and Sister Psyche. Later on, there's hinted that Sister Psyche is still alive. somewhere else. She's in somebody else's body. She's mind writing probably a Cray protector. Uh, but this storyline was not well received by the player base. And I do have to give Paragon props for sticking to their guns and following through and finishing the storyline out, even when every single um, even when every single indication from the player base was, no, you need to rewrite this and have a different ending. So credit to Paragon for sticking to their guns. Not so credit. It's a terrible story. It's really badly written. Okay, going back to Fantasy One GPUs. They are using PowerVR GPUs. PowerVR is basically looking for customers to sell chips to and stay in the market. Now, the big problem here is that PowerVR doesn't really have a lot of experience with desktop processor workloads. Okay, yes, they sold integrated graphic processors to Intel for years, but Intel's processor workload for integrated graphics are not representative of an ordinary graphics processor workload. You would not run most graphics processes that you need a GPU to run on an integrated Intel GPU because everyone knew it was incredibly weak. What's the point? I'm pretty sure I got this badge. Alright, I think I'm going to have to go to Pocket D next. No way, I still need badges in Warburg and Siren's Call. So we'll check and make sure. Yep, looks like I already got a badge here, but let's just make sure. Okay, anyway, so InnoSilicon, their biggest problem is going to be the drivers, and this harkens back to the XGI Valeri graphics cards and the SIS Trident cards before that. Drivers really mean everything. Now, it probably is a little bit much to ask InnoSilicon Fantasy 1 to have decent OpenGL drivers. Probably also is a bit stretched to ask them to have decent DirectX drivers. But there are a number of projects underway to pipe OpenGL and previous DirectX commands over Vulkan and DX12. What that could mean, at least in theory, is that InnoSilicon PowerVR drivers could just take previous OpenGL and DirectX 11, 10, 9, 8, 7 API calls and just route them over DirectX 12 or Vulkan using a translation layer. That may be the smartest way to go since PowerVR is very, very good at Vulkan, at the Vulkan API. And if you go look at Imagination Technologies product page for Vulkan rendering, they've done a significant number of examples and have successfully shown the multi-threading. Now, I know when a lot of people hear about Vulkan multi-GPU support, their first impulse is to think it's like SLI or Crossfire, but that's not really accurate. Vulkan multi-GPU support is really much more intended to be like ARM Big Dot Little for processors, where you have a chunky processor core with lots of resources, and you have an efficient processor core with not so many resources but very power efficient, and you just run your processing threads back and forth between them based on the loading. Why did I hit the attack on here? I just needed that. Let's not get too distracted trying to multitask and not doing it very well. Okay, I want to use that on this. And up here for the badge. One more over. There it is. Badge. Okay. yeah, I'm having to pay a little bit more attention to what I'm doing and where I'm going because this is a PvP zone. Yes, there's not a huge player base, but if I do it right, I can pull off things like that and grab one badge while navigating through. Without even having to have looked at the map. Yeah, I've done this a few times. But still, pay attention. It's a PvP zone. I really don't want. I, there's a couple players who really don't like how good I am with builds. And would probably dearly love to gank me with a stalker. Plaque should be over here. There's the plaque. Okay. Anyway, so depending on how the drivers are actually set up for the Fantasy One GPUs, will I think make or break them. If the Fantasy One Power VR graphic processors entirely depend on just Vulkan API at the driver level and just route, basically pull a Valve Proton and just route all of the other API calls over Vulkan and just focus on the Vulkan performance, which Imagination Technologies is really, really good at. They really are very good at it. Then the Power VR Fantasy One graphic processors could stand to be a good value proposition. The Power VR design generally are not as expensive to make, and if they can do 1080p for $100 with massive amounts of video memory for lots of anti-aliasing and video content and video editing, then there's a strong chance that the Fantasy One graphics processors could be very capable in the multimedia content development or content creation market. Uh, and that's something where you could use a bit of graphics horsepower, but you don't need that much graphics horsepower for video rendering, video concatenating. You just need gobs of memory space. Another uh, crazier, and I mean crazier option to be, is to fit the Fantasy One Power VR cards with an M.2 SSD slot for graphics memory instead of using traditional GDDR5 or GDDR6 or LPDDR5 or LPDDR whatever. Using a solid, just letting users plug in a solid state drive. And again, the dedicated graphics memory might offer faster throughput and performance, but if you're, like trying to edit a 4K video, simply having solid state PCIe 4x access rates through it for your video memory, well, AMD's already proven that that's a pretty compelling hardware package. And that would be something that, if I had a few moments to sit down within a Silicon and talk with them about their Fantasy One GPU lineup, that's one way I would approach it. Is don't even worry about the graphics memory; just route it through a solid state controller, and just let the end users attach their own solid state drive, and just use that for the graphics memory. May not be as fast, may not be as optimized as dedicated graphics memory, but sometimes quantity is definitely better than anything else, and that may make the Fantasy One GPUs extraordinarily capable when it comes to specific media content creation. Being able to load up your entire video, 4K video, into uh, please, okay, making sure the main threads didn't restart. Being able to load everything up into video memory, that as AMD has shown in the past with the solid state Radeon, that's a pretty big game changer, definitely for content creation, definitely for media professionals. And that would make the Fantasy One GPUs, even if they're not that great for gaming, vastly desirable for, say, media servers, or uh, if you're doing image editing, or you're doing something that requires a significant amount of video memory. But you don't necessarily need a significant amount of video processing power. You just need something that's fast enough. And how many operations do you actually have to make to edit an image? Well, as laptops keep showing, you don't really need that much in the way of graphics processing hardware. You do need other resources, though. I know there's some Adobe Photoshop user out there who's screaming that the better process, the faster processor, the more capable processor you have, period, that's a big help. Okay, fair enough. I wrong target. Okay, so real quick check. Did I get all of the badges? Most recent, got Gunner. No, I missed a badge. Which badge did I miss? Oh, I don't think I got the one by the ocean. Let's go back and get the seaside badge. All I need is an ocean view. Think of your love, but know it's true. Okay, like I can feel my throat drying out. Going to have to zoom in because I thought I got this badge. You're over here somewhere. There you are. And what looks beyond, and there we go. We've got all the badges for this zone. Onwards! And I also picked up a Sheevan just in case I need it. You never know when you're going to need a Sheevan. You never know when you need a Sheevan. A Sheevan never knows when it needs you. What do you do with a Sheevan? And we'll move on to Siren's Call. Okay, what else is kind of really all I had? I think I had all of the check marks. Okay, I guess, common question. What's going to happen with Nvidia? Well, that entirely depends on how magnanimous the CCP is feeling. I think when more evidence arises of just how rotten Nvidia has been behaving, uh, most of the Nvidia executives will probably be on flights to China, and they won't be leaving. Uh, I think the full scale of just how corrupt Nvidia has been acting is it's not going to astonish me because, well, I've been kind of tracking Nvidia's misbehavior for decades now. But it is kind of interesting to watch others clue in as just how malfeasant Nvidia has been. Will Nvidia survive as a company unto itself? Possible. I think it's more likely that Nvidia may become like Silicon and primarily a national vendor, in this case, probably serving the Chinese market exclusively. That's just long-term outlook on where Nvidia is probably going to wind up. That is assuming that the Nvidia executives escape prosecution for fraud, criminal fraud, extortion, racketeering, collusion, and the other incidental charges that may arise from Nvidia's misbehaviors. Can AMD regain control? I'm not sure with the current set of ODMs that they can do that. What AMD really needs is either an internal in-house ODM who just, because AMD used to do that, they used to manufacture their cards in-house. It's like I still ran a box somewhere, have an AMD branded Radeon All-in-Wonder 8500. Wait, no. for the badges. I'm not doing the missions. So ignore the waypoint telling me to go talk to somebody. Oh, the color scheme I picked isn't so bad. I mean, I prefer the minimal graphics, but you don't get that in PvP, so at least I don't look like a walking circus clown. I don't look like an intentional walking circus clown. I mean, maybe an intentional circus clown, but anyway, so AMD really needs some ODMs, original design manufacturers, who will be at either AMD needs to get better at writing the contracts and enforcing the contracts to make sure that product gets where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be, at the price point that it's supposed to be there at that point. But if AMD can't do that, or AMD doesn't do that, and they don't do that in a hurry, if they don't find somebody who can fill orders and ship to the intended clientele, AMD stock woes will be the least of their problems. But this also is why AMD is pursuing a semi-custom market, such as with the Steam Deck, and also the contracts for the Xbox and PlayStation 5, and why AMD has done so well there. And it may be that those hard contracts for semi-custom units that, well, you really just can't take and Xbox system and rebadge it and resell it. Now, AMD has done that with some products, but they still need additional hardware, additional configuration, and it's a while before those defective chips, which didn't make it into the main assembly, reach market anyways. And they're probably often underperforming because, well, they're defective chips. It's like they may not have reached the performance targets, but they are still valid computational units otherwise, so go ahead and try to recoup some costs that way. Recoup. So kind of keeping that in mind, AMD's semi-custom work will probably be what keeps them afloat as a company, and maybe what keeps the Steam Deck alone may be what keeps AMD relevant in the PC space until they can sort out the problems with the hostile or midstream original design manufacturers. So that's a big question there, whether or not AMD can reestablish control over the discrete graphics card market. Depending on how smart Intel was at writing contracts, Intel may be poised to take market share, actual market share, away, and we'll just see how that shakes out. Okay, so that's Bloody Bay done, Boomtown done, Boomtown done. I need to go get the Mayhems. And we've done Recluse's Victory. We've done Siren's Call. Okay, the Abyss and the Hive. We've done Warburg. Recluse. We just did Warburg. So I need the Abyss and the Hive. How did I not get the Hive? Okay, the easiest way to get to the Hive. Oh, I probably didn't get to the Hive because that was too low level. And we want Woodsman. Lock Task Force. Alright, from here it's just a short hop, skip, and a jump to the Hive. Alright, next question. Why is Nvidia so popular among the graphic cards, and why do we see so many Nvidias being sold? Well, we're not really. We're seeing, and again, I made a statement before and I'll double down on it. Every single Nvidia card out there is used. It was already used in the digital currency miner's rig. It has started failing tests and is being resold for the digital currency miner to try and recoup some of the money that they did not make up through the digital currency mining itself. So if you buy an RTX, any RTX series, excepting the 1050, it probably is a used graphics card at this point. It probably will not be stable, probably will have capacitor leakage, and probably won't last very long. That's just based on average and based on the shipments, where the cards appear to be coming from, the BIOS dates that are actually hard coded into it, the BIOS revision that are hard coded into the cards. Uh, X-rays, if you have access to an X-ray machine, many of the Nvidia GPUs that are entering the market definitely shows some signs of wear and tear that are only visible under different spectrums of light. Uh, it's yes, if you X-ray a graphics processor that's been running for several years, it will have a different appearance than a graphics processor that is brand new. You will see leakages in capacitors, you will see leakages in transistors, you will see burnt out transistors. You will be able to see problems that may not show up under a normal inspection, or would they show up? You do kind of expect for memory caches to fail over, reach the read-write limit after a certain amount of time, but that's why memory is often over-provisioned. You have more memory cells in order to and error checking, so that as something errors out, you just move on to the next memory system. That's how graphics cards and memory have been working for years. It's nothing new. Uh, just determining that using the tools and utilities to see how bad the systems actually are is, well, that's not so common and can be very difficult and expensive to get a hold of. Or you just have to know somebody with in a doctor's office with the required amount of experience and accurate gear and convince them that you need a couple shots taken. The actual operation of an X-ray machine isn't all that expensive. Just saying. Uh, Obtaining one, retaining the certification to use it, obtaining the protections to actually have it installed, yeah, that gets expensive. But if you know someone who's already gone through all that trouble and they don't have any patients scheduled for the day, you can get some high quality X-ray shots done. Now, I'm not saying that this happens in the United States, but it definitely does happen in some Chinese research facilities, which is also why I'm very confident in saying that there's not a single new Nvidia graphics chip on the market right now, excepting the 1050s. And the reason why is the 1050s were never attractive to the digital currency miners to begin with. And there's been a flood of them hitting the market, and I think these are newly manufactured versions uh, that Nvidia pumped out to at least have something flowing into the retail market, legitimately flowing into a retail market. Can't prove it, or at least not yet, but that's what I think appears to be happening. Okay, actually, I need to be heading for Pocket D because now I need to swap to Rogue or Villain. I probably should run the Patron arc, although I really don't need the Patron tertiaries. Well, I've got all three of my builds built. It's not like I can use the Patron tertiaries. Okay, so kind of keep on the so there are 1050s that are legitimately, I think, new 1050s legitimately entering the market. Uh, and I think they are new production simply because they are cheap to make, uh, very cheap to manufacture. And those may be the only new NVIDIA graphics chips you can get that weren't first used in a digital currency farm until they burnt out. Yeah, Nvidia's heading for a big train wreck, and I can't say that I'm even the most bit sorry. I think this also links into why. Hang on, I'm keeping an eye on the badges that I get because I have not done the 7 days as a villain, so I just kind of locked myself in the villain side for at least the next week as I chase after the uh, villain alignment badge, but that's okay. Port Oaks, St. Marshall. All right, wow, we've been at this for over an hour. I can't believe my throat's held up long. Bonk. Alright, I am heading for a smuggler sub. I don't think there's one in the zone. So we're just gonna camp to Granville. Mystery searcher for some reason. Well, we'll come back and get that later. I want the subs on the other side. And we want to, whoa, hello. Do I have Monster Island? How did I get Monster Island and not get the Abyss? Let's double check that. Okay, yeah, I've got all the badges on Monster Island. There we go. Good thing I've got a bit of stealth. I may want to put up more stuff. Oh, come on, these guys can't hurt me. Smack. Alright, next question. If putting a solid-state drive M.2 connector on a graphics card and using that for the graphics card memory is such a great idea, why haven't AMD or Nvidia already done it? Well, AMD did do that. But they did it for their professional line of graphics cards. And that's going to bring up a completely different subject, which I'll come back to, if I remember to. Still got some more badges to get through, so probably got time to get back to it. Anyways, so AMD has done that. Why haven't we seen it done in the consumer market? Well, for the practical matter that most consumer applications normally aren't graphics memory bound. There's only so much memory that you can put into the video RAM that is still usable for a rendered application. You can feed 16 gigabytes of video RAM to your processor, but if you're only rendering into a 1080p screen space, fitting 16 gigs of RAM doesn't actually get you anything. That massive amount of extra memory is only really useful if you have if you are doing something that can take advantage of loading lots of content into video memory, such as editing pictures. If you are editing pictures at 8K resolution and you have a massive amount of color detail and you captured in raw format, yeah, you might get a significant amount of mileage out of being able to load that entire picture into video memory. On top of that, you may get even more mileage out of... Okay, where am I going? I'm going to Cap. I don't think I can get there from... Oh. Pretty sure I'm going to be in Cap Diablo. Not Kappa. Port Oaks? No. Yes, Port Oaks. Port Oaks is where I want to go. As I get distracted. Uh, anyways, there you and for the most part for a game, you get more mileage out of optimized memory and latencies. How long does the information take to transfer? For those reasons, and let's take our notoriety back down. Kind of for those reasons, the idea of putting a solid state drive on a consumer graphics card, not just it's not really something that gives a huge amount of benefit to the average consumer who's trying to buy a graphics card to play a game. Now, if or just to do occasional work. Now, if you're a professional level videographer, that might be a huge bonus, and that's why I think that in a Silicon and maybe even Intel, they might have an opening there to just do M.2 solid state drive as the graphics memory as an option. That may be something to help set their cards apart. They may not be great for gaming, but they'll be really, really good for various multimedia creativity operations, especially for video editing. And, another example is, although I have never found a good alternative to Picasa, but Picasa lets you load up all the pictures that you had, sort them, filter them, look for duplicates. Being able to load all of your pictures up in video memory rather than in system memory, so they're already on the graphics card for the image processing. That's another thing that massive amounts of video memory, but maybe not necessarily memory performance, would be a really good thing. Excuse me. So that's why we haven't seen it. AMD proved it can be done. I think that's how Valve could be arranging the Steam Deck to work, because it is a good technique if you need extra video memory for specific operations in a hurry. But we'll just kind of have to wait on that one. And here comes the Fun Brigade. May have to go get another monster. And if you're wondering why I always have like the right click window up, I abuse the heck out of the right click bind and move to move the camera. But that's not always the greatest position to be in, because you can easily right click on something trying to grab and hold the camera. Now, at the same time, I don't want to change it so that the camera is always locked to the mouse, so that just moving the mouse moves the camera, because that induces motion sickness. Did that once, and I think Foxcat was looking over my shoulder, and he was not happy. Oh. Alright, I'm actually gonna break it here for the moment and go get something else to drink. And so I'll be back later I'm kind of going to just do the rest of these badge hunts off camera.